Welcome to episode 44 of the Liz McMullen Show. I have a trailblazer, a very accomplished author, KG MacGregor, on the show. Welcome to the show, KG.
Thank you very much. I don't know that I would consider myself a trailblazer. I've done a lot of following.
Yeah, well, sometimes, it's like walking in the snow. Even if there may be footprints that you're walking in from somebody ahead of you, you're still kind of marking the trail going forward, because as we all know, for those of us who deal with snow, more snow falls and you have to keep that path going.
Well, that's the thought of snow is something that sort of sends me in the opposite direction, so I'll have to take your word for it.
I hear you. I know that there are regional preferences, differences in what people would prefer. Given blizzard or blazing, I'd go blizzard. This summer, I was disintegrating in the heat in Texas and New Orleans and Savannah this summer.
Yeah, I really love the humidity. I lived in Florida for so many years, and the mosquitoes and I were on a first name basis. And I just really got used to it. I loved it. Right now, I'm in the mountains of North Carolina, and it's a beautiful fall up here now. Our nights are dipping down in the 40s, and probably by next week we'll be down in the 30s. And it's time for me to leave. It's time for me to go to my winter house, which is in Palm Springs, California. I've spent a couple of winters here in Boone, and in fact, the last winter I was here, we had 8 feet of snow. Ugh. And it's not that I haven't learned how to drive in it and learned how to get around in it and learned that you just have to stay stocked up and be prepared for it, and never go anywhere without a heavy coat, just in case your car breaks down and you have to walk. So, I know all the rules, but as long as I have a choice, I'll choose not to do that.
So what you were mentioning before we started recording is that you do some of your writing while walking via dictation. Yes, I do.
I have. I've been dealing with some back problems the last 5 or 6 years, and I have a lot of trouble sitting for a long period of time. So I've had to adapt, and obviously one of the ways you adapt is you stand up and write, and I do that. I have a desk that goes up and down, and I just move around all day. But I also have started doing a lot of my work dictating, and there's no better place to write than on a mountain trail. It's really quite lovely.
I agree with you there. I went to college in New England, and there was nothing like walking through the woods and listening to the wind going through the autumn leaves and crunching the leaves underneath your shoes. It was quite something. So I'm right there with you. You started writing, according to your bio, inspired by Xena Warrior Princess, and you write Uber fan fiction.
I did for a while, and in fact, I guess I would always consider the Xenaverse my writing home, or certainly my writing roots. There were several hundred of us actually who were writing, but dozens, in fact, who were very active on the writers list, the listservs, the forums, and we had events like BardCon and BardFest where we would join with each other and share in just the excitement of writing, and it was just such a celebration because most of us had only been writing for a couple of years, and it wasn't yet a job. It was a hobby. It was fun. It was exciting, and for the readers, it was all free, and that was just an excellent way to connect with the rest of the community.
It's a huge break, and it can't be minimized. That women make money less money than men, and oftentimes lesbians make even less money. Not that you can't be strong, amazing career women, and there are tons of them out there, but there are a lot of folks who have a hard time finding money to buy books, and there's like that huge craving. And so having free fan fiction was great, especially when I didn't have a book budget. And the other thing that I recommend for all you guys listening is, if you've read a novel and you've enjoyed it as many times as you need to, I highly recommend that you donate them to the nearest LGBT center. I moved from near New York City to the Jersey Shore, and I donated about 200 books. There were space issues, but also I was trying to pay it forward for all the times I wish that I could get my hands on something fresh and new, and that was my way of letting other people experience that. And it shouldn't, I wish that money wasn't a factor when it comes to having access to our stories, lesbian fiction.
Yeah, I think that it's been good for everyone that ebooks have come out, and that they're less expensive, and people can therefore buy more of them.
Mm-hmm. I like it because you can get them on publisher websites where the majority, where more money actually goes to the authors and editors and publishers. And it is affordable, and people have more access. Because I remember, when I was younger, going into bookstores, and I wanted to buy more books, but I didn't have $16, $17, $20 to spend on a book.
Yeah, the books used to be a whole lot more expensive, in fact. Those were the days when most books were being printed print on demand, and they were really horribly expensive. They were, in fact, for a more substantial book, you were paying almost $20, and I think you can certainly get away with less now, and save some on the ebook. A lot of people have trouble with the rationalization for why they have to pay so much for an ebook in the first place, and obviously the reason is that you're paying to produce the book. The book itself, print-wise, really only costs $1.50 to print, so you can't expect to save a whole lot more off an ebook than you would off a print book. There are obviously advantages to having print, but the ebooks are getting such a big footprint now, and they're getting they're more widely accepted, and people who swore they would never do it have relented and realized there are a lot of advantages to being able to carry around 100 books in a little in
an e-reader. For me, I always was a huge proponent of having the hard copy in my hands. I loved, sitting down in a bookstore on the floor because I'm classy, and I would, read the first page or so to see if it was something that, if I liked the writer's style and whatnot. But one of the realities that's an offshoot of the boom in ebooks is bookstores are closing left and right. And I worked at not alternative, I guess it was New Age bookstore in Northampton, Massachusetts. And at the time, there were several different ways of printing something. There were the hard copies, there was the media, a little bit nicer than a regular paperback, and then there was a paperback, and there's a huge range in prices for that, and release dates according to how much money things were going to cost. And as things went, books out longer, then they'll put out a cheaper copy. But now, like, Barnes & Noble can't stay open. I've had them closing all over the place. All my favorite lesbian bookstores, even in New York City, which you think would be able to thrive, they keep on closing, and there's less and less places to have that communal experience of actually holding the books in your hand.
Yeah, it's not affecting only our community. It's affecting all sorts of book lovers and book communities. But there's another side to that, and that is that I have people in my book community from Norway and from Australia and all over the U.S. and Canada, and if we were, in the days when we were reliant on bookstores, you wouldn't get that perspective. You wouldn't get the chance to interact with people all over the place. So there certainly is a trade-off, and it's a shame we can't have both to choose from.
Yeah. I have a question from one of your fans. Her name is Robin Lynn, and this is from Facebook. And she wrote, do you believe fan fiction and Uber stories you have penned help you hone your skills as a published writer, giving you a start, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the fun things about writing Uber fiction and fan fiction is that and I say it's fun because it was fun to be a part of it. It probably wasn't fun for people who weren't in the community and were picking up these stories, but it was actually fun to pick up on the cliches, the things that other writers were doing, and to just be a part of it and to feel like you were, in the club and in the community. And everyone in the Xenaverse kind of picked up their mantle to do something. There were lots of readers who went on to start websites and to host all of these stories, to aggregate them and index them and make them searchable. And then they put up, like at the Athenaeum, they installed software that let you rate stories and write reviews and group them by author so that you can go and look up and find all of my stories all in one place, and it would have the date that it was posted, and so you could in effect read any writer's history of participation in the community. And when we first started writing like that, probably the greatest gift of all was the confidence that I got from the readers, because that was the reader's role, and they picked it up and they handled it very well. When I would post a story online, then I could expect 100 emails from enthusiastic readers to thank me for posting it, to comment on it, to tell me they enjoyed it, to maybe nitpick it a little bit, and that was. It fed the urge to keep writing. It made everyone, all of us who were as writers interacting with each other, talked about how important that was to us to get that feedback. And sadly, over the years, it dropped off. It dropped off considerably. And in fact, the last time I posted a story online was for the Academy of Bards Valentine's Day special about 3 years ago, and I got no comments on it at all.
Yeah, I did a few guest hosting interviews on the Cocktail Hour, and I've heard quite a few authors talk about that fall off and how not having that interaction takes away from the experience. One of the things I want to mention, especially for the younger listeners on the show, and by younger I mean probably in your 20s or so, is that when I was, I'm 37, when I was in college, the internet was fairly new. Wasn't the best way to do research because you never knew what was good and what was crap. And it wasn't very user-friendly. And there are these things called listservs and whatnot, and message boards where you could have some interaction. So what KG was just talking about, with different folks creating websites and aggregating the material and making it searchable and giving access as well as the ability to comment on stuff. This is like the precursor to what we're experiencing with social media such as Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and any myriad of ways that people are connecting with each other. And it's interesting how technology was helping us get closer to each other, because there was this sense of community, as you mentioned, with the Xenaverse, and now there is a sense of community, not just with Facebook, but people who are able to go to GCLS and be surrounded by like-minded individuals with similar focus on what they're interested in reading. Was your first writing Xenaverse stuff, and why do you choose to do Uber rather than something that is in line with the time period for Xena?
Well, I think my writing experience actually came out of my reading experience. When I first started reading, I was only interested in reading Xena fan fiction, built around the show, featuring Xena and Gabrielle in ancient Greece, and it was like it filled a gap for how much I was enjoying the show, because I was watching the show at the time. It was on, and this was back in the late 90s, and it was on the air. So I was reading fan fiction to augment viewing the show, and the fan fiction was filling in those gaps that weren't being explicitly played up in the show. The things that we knew were happening, they just wouldn't put them on TV. Damn it! So we wrote it and we read it to have that experience and to kind of close the circle, and then at the end of the show, Xena died, and to me that kind of killed the canon, because I was particularly fond of stories that stayed true to the canon of the show. They didn't set Xena and Gabrielle off in the Amazon village forever, because Xena's dead. She can't do that. So at that point, I stopped reading Xena fan fiction. I felt like the story was finished. There really wasn't any more to tell. And if I were to go back and read something old, it's sort of like, well, I know how this ends, and it doesn't end well. So I switched over, and I actually got fixated on Mel and Janice fan fiction. And if you're not familiar with that, it's all based on one single episode, the Xena Scrolls, which posited that Xena and Gabrielle were, Mel and Janice were actually their descendants. And it was set during World War II. It was kind of a takeoff on Indiana Jones. And so I began reading Mel and Janice fan fiction and got hung up on that. And the last thing I wanted to read at all was Uber fan fiction. I just didn't get that. I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand why people would write it or why it was interesting until I read a story by an author who went by the name of Friction. And it was called, I'm not going to get this right, but it was a story that started with Xena and Gabrielle, and then they jumped through this time warp into modern times. And as soon as I read that, I got the appeal. It was instant. And I thought, now I know. Now you go read these stories and you just kind of keep it in the back of your head that these are the same people. They are, but they're just in a future life. So I started reading Uber, and then the only story that I ever wrote that really was a true Uber was the Shaken series, and those characters were based on Xena and Gabrielle. I described them physically as the same people, but after that, I began writing different characters. I began writing different descriptions. I began seeing different people playing these parts, and I know for some people who are hardcore Uber fans that didn't cut it. But I think that over time, most of them have come along.
When did you make the transition from being a fanfic writer to being a published author?
I published my first book in 2003, and it was called Shaken, and it was the compounded version of the 3 stories that I wrote online, and I published it with Cavalier Press. They did not stay in business very long, and so it was out of print not long after that. And it was actually 2005 that I signed with Bella Books. And at that point, I felt more like an original lesbian fiction writer than a fan fiction writer. But that's not to say that I would ever disclaim my Xenaverse roots.
I have a question for you. Well, I'll precursor it with my own feelings about Xena at the time, because when it was popular, I was in my late teens, early 20s. Because everybody was supposed to like it, I decided I was supposed to hate it. But one of the things that I got into was conqueror fiction. This is only recently, maybe in the last 4 or 5 years. But one of the issues that I have with not just Uber, just other writing, is some folks always figure out a way to swirl it back to being Xena and Gabrielle. And my feeling is that, these archetypes existed long before Xena Warrior Princess was a show, and it was something that people could relate to. But I hate this, I hate when folks try to make, this is Uber, this book is totally, this is the Xena character and this is the Gabrielle character. And yeah, I don't always agree. I don't always agree.
The contrast of the characters it's a literary device that's been around for thousands of years. There's light and dark, strong and weak, the warrior versus the innocent. I mean, that's really a well-known literary model. So it's not, even there are plenty of people who write books like that, who write lesbian fiction like that, who have no clue who Xena and Gabrielle are.
Exactly.
Never watched it. And there are plenty of readers out there who look for that and who love that, and I applaud it. I hope they get all they want. And there are others who don't, and I hope they get all they want too. Mm-hmm. I think there's obviously plenty of stuff out there, and people can find the kind of books they're looking for.
Yeah, I can even see it being shaped by for some folks who find Xena and Gabrielle everywhere. That's just a part of what their personal taste and what they particularly like in fiction. And they like in their lesbian fiction or the interactions that they have.
If that enhances their enjoyment of the book, then I think that's great.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I want to transition to talking about Rhapsody. And the reason why I'm making that transition, because you were talking about literary devices, and I feel, safe in saying your background in journalism, your PhD in journalism, kind of gave you a stepstone for this particular story. And if you could take a moment to give a little summary of, like the black blurb or whatnot of Rhapsody.
Okay, Rhapsody is the story of Ashley Giroux, who is the local news anchor in Tampa. She's a popular personality in the Tampa Bay community, and is for her work life, she's a very public figure, and then the moment she leaves work, she's a very private figure. She lives her life very quietly. She's withdrawn from people. She has very few friends and no romantic prospects at all. She meets Julia, who is Julia Whitethorn, who is her new hairdresser, and they hit it off. And Julia has a number of lesbian friends that she's very close to, and she invites Ashley into their little clique for the sorts of fun things friends do together. And Ashley's reluctant at first, but she lets herself be drawn in and finds that she enjoys it. She enjoys the company, she enjoys the friendship, she enjoys being one of them, and she falls. Ashley has a lot of baggage, and that's what causes her to withdraw from people. And the book is really about her working through a lot of that baggage. And in fact, it's about Julia working through that baggage too.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I noticed for both of the books that I'm reading on this episode was that the pacing was very methodical. It was slowly achieving one step at a time, where Ashley's slowly moving towards opening herself up, and as with any change in life, there are setbacks, and there are also times when change is just so jarring and terrifying that it's easier to revert towards putting up the walls and stepping back.
Yes, the book is really built around, and conceptually it's a journey. And as you know, if you're plotting out a journey, then you start at one point, and to get to the end point, you have to pass through lots of points in the middle. And so that's where the pacing comes in this particular book. It's the underlying structure of it is obviously Ashley and Julia falling in love and overcoming their obstacles to be together. But the greater focus of the book is their journey, their individual journeys to become the people they need to be in order to be together.
One of the other things that I noticed for this book is that there were a lot of characters. Was it difficult to keep them all sorted out in your mind? They're ancillary characters, they're main characters, they're characters that are a part of a particular moment in the novel itself. But what are some of the things that you do to kind of keep track of all these folks? Because there are quite a few in this particular novel.
The way I do characters, my two main characters always have at least 3, usually 4 things that drive them, things that describe them, and things that you'll see over and over again. For example, Ashley's characteristics are that she's professional, she's withdrawn, she's damaged, and she's friendly. She reaches out to people appropriately. Mm-hmm. Julia is going to have 3 or 4 main characteristics also. Now, what I do after that is, after those 2 main characters, then the characters underneath them usually only have 2. They only have 2 characteristics. I don't delve a whole lot deeper into those characterizations, because to do so would take focus away from the main characters. But I give them two characteristics because they should have dimension. Mm-hmm. The secondary characters, and then I have what's called the tertiary characters, and those are the ones who come into a scene or two for the purpose of doing something. Mm-hmm. For example, Ashley's assistant, Aaron. I didn't have to describe him very deeply because he was there to fulfill a role. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jarvis had, he was a little more well defined, as were Julia's friends. Teddy was a lot of fun.
I know. I was just going to bring up Teddy. What I loved about Teddy was not only did you go against what people's first impressions of her, who Teddy is. Teddy had a journey, on during this novel, and I guess it could be a subplot, but I liked seeing first that she's more than being, highly flirtatious and very outrageous in terms of her appearance. She's also got a huge heart, and she's very protective of her friends, and I liked, anytime that I learned more about Teddy, I felt that I liked her even more.
Yeah, Teddy was also, I also used her characterization in a way in her journey to contrast the journey that Julia was on. Mm-hmm. Particularly with regard to when Teddy was had gotten involved with the other woman, mm-hmm. and they decided that they didn't want to rush into anything, and then in the end, she was complaining that she just kind of waited too long and it fizzled out, and that was that was her experience. And when she's sharing it with Julia is worrying that oh gosh, could that happen to me? What if Ashley and I put this off too long and then it doesn't work? Could the same thing happen to us? So Teddy's journey was kind of set up to make Julia think too.
It also added to a level of tension, and there was a really important reason why Teddy and Patsy kept their distance, and even though they had chemistry, and that's because what they had in common was Teddy's best friend Jordan was in late stages of cancer and needed support and help, and so her cousin Patsy came to live in with her and help her through what were her hardest days. And so the real and the important focus was on Jordan. And I read a book by Jennifer Fulton called Naked Heart, and one of the subplots was this mercenary soldier type of person, or clandestine, but she also did security at her friend's club and was trying to kind of shoulder some of the responsibilities because the club owner, who is her best friend, had cancer, and there was a relationship between her friend and another woman who worked with her. And even though she had interest in this other woman somewhat, the important relationship was Jordan, and they didn't want, not Jordan, but the important relationship was the club owner, and so it was best for them to kind of cast aside their chemistry in order to deal with what was happening. But I also saw in your novel that the chemistry between the two of them, between Jordan's cousin and Teddy, was this, their love for Jordan. I think that was wrapped up in it as well.
Yeah. Well, it was also, Teddy's experience with losing Jordan was also something that I put in there so that it too could be a part of Ashley's journey, because Ashley had to learn that to have friends means to have to be a friend. And it was important for her to step up for Teddy, to sort of, complete the friendship. You can't say you have a lot of friends because people do things for you. You have to repay that, and that's what makes friendships so rich. And that was something that Ashley learned.
I also liked, because Ashley was a newscaster and often would be covering or involved with charity work, and raising money for Jordan's healthcare bills. It was really a personal thing, and as you said, it was a part of being they weren't a clique in a bad sense. They were just a small group of people who really care about each other, and Teddy really cared about Jordan, and so she had this fundraising event, and so for once Ashley was doing something that not only was good and was within her nature, but she also was doing something that was a part of the friendship.
Right.
I have a question/comment from another listener, good friend of mine, and also a fan of yours. Her handle is Taja Rack. Please ask KG MacGregor how she manages to write a complete story regardless of length. I've noticed with her work, even her shorts, so to speak, always have fully realized characters and plots. Not everyone can or takes time to do this, and I've always marveled at her talent. Thanks.
Well, that was a very nice thing to say.
She's totally wonderful, and before you respond to it, she's very real. She, when she gives positive feedback, it's because she truly feels it.
Well, to me, the highest compliment that I get from readers is to hear that the characters that I've created seem real to them. Mm-hmm. Because particularly when you're writing romance, the most important thing is to write the people in an authentic way, and to have them behave in an authentic way, not to make them one way throughout the whole book and then change them dramatically at the end of the book so that you can get them to do what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. That's not the way people are. People, if they change, their changes is it's either gradual or it's caused by a tremendous event that is, it can't be duplicated. It can't.
With the pacing of Rhapsody, a lot of times, not intentionally, sometimes intentionally, novels follow like a 3-act structure where in the beginning you're introduced to the character there and their status quo, and then something happens to tumble them out of that, their comfort zone, and it's the first door of no return, and then you have the middle of the story, and then there's another door of no return that leads you to the third act, and the climax, and then the resolution. But when you write a novel like Rhapsody, and the pacing and the journey, there are a lot of plots and twists and turns and growth that are at the pace of life rather than at the pace of a structure. And I was wondering, do you ever find yourself, are you a planner or a pantser when you're organizing these journeys? Is it something that just happens organically as you're thinking about them, or, what's your process?
Well, to me, the process is I have a starting point, and sometimes that starting point is I have a character I want to describe, and I want her to meet someone, and so then I have to think of, well, who do I want her to meet, and how will they meet? And for example, in the story Rhapsody, Ashley was she was the focal character as I was planning and writing the book. As it turned out, I think that I think that, in fact, Julia was the one who took the greater journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't necessarily think that at the beginning, but I always knew how I was going to finish that book. And when it was, in fact, finished, I sat back and thought, well, the person who really took the journey in this one was the person who had to go the farthest in this one was Julia. So
why do you say that?
Well, Ashley still has a journey to complete, and if she had completed her journey, then Julia wouldn't have had to complete hers, because Julia had to come to grips with how much she loved Ashley and what she was willing to sacrifice for her.
Mm-hmm.
She was willing to sacrifice to be with her. And if Ashley had completed her journey, then Julia wouldn't have had to sacrifice anything.
That's true.
And so, in fact, she was the one, and I underscored that when her friend Elaine dragged her out to look at the rescue greyhounds, and she was given a choice to adopt. If you want a playful dog that will be a lot of fun and give you no trouble at all, then take one of these. But if you want one that is special, that really needs you, then take this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the one she took. And so that was also the decision that she made regarding Ashley.
I missed the metaphor. I saw the similarities, though, when I was reading those scenes. And because, as you said, the journey is also involving the internal dialogue of this particular character and how she's processing her experience. And, that's a good little snapshot. I wanted to ask you, since you have a PhD in journalism, have you sought out writing, how they say, write what you know? Did you find your interest in this story coming from that background?
Actually, no. I do have a PhD in journalism, but I never. I worked in a newsroom. In fact, I worked in several newsrooms, but I worked in the capacity of a polling consultant.
Okay.
I had the focus of my PhD was in survey research methods, and so I was a statistician and
like focus groups and things like that.
Well, I ended up doing that when I went into my market research career, but in my PhD I was a quantitative. I had a quantitative focus, so I had a lot of, I did a lot of statistical modeling and predictive modeling, and in fact my specialty was public opinion surveys, polling surveys, political surveys, who's going to vote for whom and why, and what effect is political advertising having on people's voting decisions, and those were my interest. And how much information do people retain from what they read in the newspaper versus what they see on the television news or read in magazines or read on blogs, and those were the particular areas of study I had as an academic. But I didn't. After I got my PhD, I taught a few classes, university level classes, but that wasn't for me. I just really preferred working in the industry, and if I could have made my living at doing polling on social issues, I would have liked to have done that, but there's not a huge market to pay for those things. So people who have research skills end up using those skills for for companies that are trying to launch products or trying to improve their customer satisfaction and so on. And so I ended up doing more market research than
like as a tool for predicting future behavior. Yes.
In fact, if I were writing what I know, the character of Carmen DeLallo in my book Out of Love is probably closer to the kind of work that I did.
Oh. And Out of Love did win an award, correct?
Yes, it did. It won the Golden Crown Award for contemporary romance, and it won the Lambda Literary Award for women's romance.
So are you on the board of trustees at the Lambda Literary?
I certainly am. That's my other job. Keeps me very, very busy.
Well, what kind of things are your responsibilities there?
Well, I'm the secretary of the organization, so obviously that means that I have to keep records on all our meetings, but it means that I'm on the executive committee as well, so I have a lot of planning responsibilities. And I am the head of the fundraising committee, which is great fun. It keeps me quite busy, but it makes me always conscious of how to engage with people about the mission of the Lambda Literary Foundation and
what is the mission of the Lambda Literary?
Well, our mission is we have several things that we try to do. We promote excellence through we promote and honor excellence through the Lambda Literary Awards. We nurture new writers through our Emerging Writers Workshop, mm-hmm. And we promote through reviews and feature stories in our Lambda Literary Review. We also have another program called Writers in the Schools, where we try to link up LGBT writers to go and speak to classes at middle schools and high schools and community colleges about, to speak to their Gay-Straight Alliance and talk to them about the stories of LGBT people and where they can learn more, where they can learn more about the experience of their own experience or their experience of their friends who happen to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender.
Does this involve any anti-bullying stuff or things along the lines of It Gets Better?
Well, not in any formal way. Of course, we support It Gets Better, and we and the purpose of our Writers in the Schools program is to normalize the experience for LGBT kids, mm-hmm. so that in fact they don't have to face bullying, and if they do, that they'll have allies that will stand with them.
That's great. One of the challenges for LGBT groups and support groups and that focus is sometimes we need to band together and also be with folks who have a shared experience. But in order to affect social change, to really have an impact, not only being, comfortable in your own skin, you really do have to engage and spend time and get allies to be a part of the cause in order to be truly integrated into the community at large.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been seeing happen over the last. In particular, 5 years. And I believe it started when Gavin Newsom decided that he was going to marry gay people City Hall in San Francisco, and he pulled. I won't say he pushed. He pulled the issue front and center, and made people all over the country start focusing on it. And we have seen. I can't think of any other time in history when we've seen social change happen so quickly. It hasn't seemed quickly for a lot of us because, we remember, back in the 70s how difficult it was to be gay and to have to hold that as your most protected secret. But
it's been quite a rush lately, I have to say, and the last few years or so, it's in stark contrast with, really huge backslides in terms of women's rights, civil rights, and health. But, the contrast of what's been happening quickly is, one state after another is approving marriage equality. Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been repealed. There's concerted effort to get federal benefits for partners, and just a whole slew of other very important queer LGBTQ civil rights. And at the same time, we have such appalling things happening in Congress and the Senate, legislating women's bodies in a way that I am really incredulous. And I think a placard that pretty much said it all on Facebook was a photograph of a woman who was protesting, and I think it's something. She was, I think, in her 60s or somewhere in that area, if not more. And she says, "I can't believe I'm still protesting this."
Yeah. I think that the issue of women and the issue of race are ongoing issues, but I do believe that that for whatever reason, the LGBT issue is starting to feel to a lot of its detractors that it's an issue they've lost, and there's nothing going to change that. So I think that maybe some of the surge that we've seen against women is probably a backlash because they've lost this other war, and so they're going to turn back and refocus their efforts against women.
It's so terribly obscene, from a feminist and women's history perspective. So much of it has the feel of, when birth control was first made available, the pill, or the constant hemming and hawing and back and forthing regarding the concept of legalization of abortion. And one of the things that, I just can't believe how much the ante has been increased. I mean, usually, some of the legislation was trying to force women who were considering or wanting to have an abortion that they had to look at certain literature or photographs or videos, graphic videos and whatnot, showing them what happens during an abortion or whatever, just trying to shame them into not doing it. And you could have knocked me over with a feather where they're talking about making women have intrauterine ultrasounds before they can have an abortion.
Yeah, I think they treat the people who are treating this issue, who are against this issue, are treating it the same as they're treating the voting rights issues. I think they sit around and brainstorm what sorts of legal obstacles they can throw in the path to make it more difficult. I think it's the last gasp of people who know they're losing power.
Yeah, one of the things that was more apparent at the time of Obama's reelection. And even, like last year was a huge deal because I was displaced by Superstorm Sandy, and the big to-do was the ability to vote. And that particular election was a huge thing. And, you would have expected a big hullabaloo about people contesting someone's right to vote in a particular place. And yet there were folks who were, there are all these makeshift polling places for people to go to. But on Jon Stewart's show, he was joking about the fact that the percentage of voter fraud is almost non-existent, and yet these political ads that are put out that are trying to disenfranchise people, they're disenfranchising the folks who are not going to vote for them. They're just, it's like Jim Crow all over again.
They're emperors without clothes. They know what they're saying is not true. They know.
These political ads, they just blow my mind. And half the time when folks, who are inexperienced with politics or don't know because like you and I can say, what crap is this? And then there are others who see, Obamacare, and they have no idea what it entails. Yet they are vehemently against it, and a lot of their views
also and polling. And this is something that I always pay attention to because of my polling background. But the pollsters have shown repeatedly that Obamacare gets poor grades, but the Affordable Health Care Act gets much better grades, and that the components of the Affordable Care Act are all very popular. They just don't want it because it's Obamacare. But I think that those are what we would call low information voters. They have a few. They're particularly susceptible to television ads and slogans and they'll look to certain people for their cues on how they should vote. They don't. They're not as involved, but they just know what they're against. So it's something we're going to have to find our way out of. I don't think that's going to happen overnight. I think that's going to be a long, slow slog.
Yeah, I'm going to draw a very strange bridge right now. Come along with me for the ride.
Yeah.
As we
I think we probably lost some of our reading.
No, actually, oddly, for the other book that I read to review for this episode, West of Nowhere, Amber Halliday has a huge journey, and she starts at what we're kind of describing. The folks that are susceptible are being manipulated, and as we're talking about like ads and whatnot, and Amber is just kind of going with the flow of whatever seems to work, and she ends up being left unceremoniously in the side of the road like a trick, and she's got no rudder. She did not finish high school. She can't keep a job, and she pretty much was living with whomever was going to take care of her, and she didn't have a lot of direction, and then she ends up finding not just a different way of life. She was able to finally make an informed decision about her life at the end.
Well, I think she fell into something that we've probably all had, whether we recognized it or not. There's always somebody that comes along in your life who influences you, mm-hmm. And in many cases it probably was a teacher. It was a teacher that liked you, that believed in you, and made you work harder. And you wanted to please that teacher, and so you worked harder, you studied harder, and you got better grades, and I think that's kind of Amber's experience in this book is she's never had anyone in her life who ever believed in her before. Mm-hmm. She meets Joy. It's a totally different experience, and when she has someone who can actually say, I think you can do good things, I think you can succeed, then she starts to believe it herself, and she wants to be that person.
At first, it was a very bumpy start, and it's almost like trying to open a rusty door with no grease.
Yeah, it's really tricky. It's a tricky thing to do when you're writing lesbian romance. If you're going to have a journey for a character, you have to be careful that where you start her is not in such a bad place that readers don't want to get past the first couple of chapters. And I did have a few people who wrote to me and said this was, I just didn't like her and I didn't care what happened to her. Oh. And I appreciate that from people, and they should all go find something they like.
Well, I mean, what I felt with both of your books is that in order to experience the journey and see what you crafted, is that you, as a reader, you have to be on board and tenacious about it, because there's no swirling, really active, drama coming from every direction, no heart racing moments. And you have to go on this journey with the characters and really stick with it. And what I think is interesting and more accessible is that it feels more like the pace of life rather than the pace of a plot, that is written with a certain level of, I don't know. I like all kinds of books, so I don't want to disparage any particular style. But I'd say for these two books, you'd have to actually be on board and willing to see where things were going to go. Yes,
I think so. They're not. Neither is what I would call a page turner. More of a slow burn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a lot of struggles that they were going through, and in the beginning, maybe one of the reasons why Amber may seem unlikable, she also doesn't really like herself.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't like herself at all. She doesn't respect herself.
And honestly, towards the end, I thought she was going to backslide. I really thought that she was going to, when put to the wall and given this very, a burr in her side, so to speak. It could have been a complete blockbuster to her relationship with Joy, and it could have been a blockbuster to the progress that she made under the tutelage of Joy and Shep, and of feeling good about the work that she's doing. And so I was surprised at that. I thought that she was going to have a little more of a falter.
Yeah, she'd already at that point. At that point, I didn't want my readers to question whether or not she had any unresolved issues regarding her sexuality. Mm-hmm. And so I think at that point it was very important to establish that Amber was a lesbian. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that she lived with, a couple of boyfriends who put a roof over her head and took care of her, then that never was the life that she preferred. Mm-hmm. But she was a survivor, and she looked for whatever way she could get by.
Yeah, one of I guess the we're going to pull in the episode right now, and my last comment is about She finally was, especially towards in the last eighth of the book, she's finally making choices rather than responding to whatever is happening around her. She wanted to find a job, and to do whatever it needs to take that. And during this journey, which I won't give away the end, of course, she wanted to be in charge of it. She didn't want to, find another couch to crash on, or, somebody, utilizing her body as a way to provide for herself. And, I felt it was a very complete journey for her. And Joy had her own little journey as well. But for you listeners out there, these are two valuable books. As she said, KG said, it's a slow burn, and you have to get on board for the ride. Get into a comfortable chair and at your preferred beverage of choice, hot chocolate, coffee, whatever, and spend some time with these characters. So I want to thank you for coming on the show, KG. We've had a very varied and interesting discussion. I hope everybody stayed on board with us as we veered off into civil rights and whatnot. But at the same time, I don't feel it's tangential. We're talking about the human experience and the human experience for lesbians, and this is all a part of it. And
before I let you go, I'd like to mention that I have a book coming out next month called Etched in Shadows.
And what can you say just a little bit about it?
Yes, it's a much quicker pace. In fact, the chapter 1 opens with a plane crash.
Ooh.
And it's a story that I think people enjoyed The House on Sandstone. They enjoy this story because it involves a couple of women who've known each other for many years, and they've been best friends for many years. But it takes a tragedy to bring them together, and this is a book where there aren't any bad guys. It's just circumstances that are difficult and push both of these women into difficult decisions, but they want to be together. They love each other and they want to be together. And so this is the story of their romance. And I'm actually now working on another that is what I would hope will be a page turner. It's a romance, but it's also a kind of a political story, political intrigue story that I think people who prefer something with a little more plot to their romance will enjoy.
Yeah. One other thing, I know that you may not consider yourself a trailblazer, but one of the things that makes you a well-rounded author is that you don't have just one note. You have a wide variety of different styles and approaches, and the Shaken series, if I remember, has a very shaky start. And for those of you out there, check out her website, look at the blurbs and see what revs your engine and what is your style in terms of what you're looking for in a story, whether it be fast-paced or methodical or, what kind of journey that you're interested in. And I think that you'll enjoy your time. I want to thank you, KG, for coming on the Liz McMullen Show to talk about the craft of writing and amongst other things. And I've really enjoyed my time with you.
I want to take a moment also to thank you. We talked about this before you started the program, but I wanted to bring up the fact that writers do have a lot to do to get their books out, and we're all charged now with doing a lot of our promotion, and we profoundly appreciate the work that goes into putting a show like yours together, particularly the fact that you do it week in and week out, and you're scheduled out for the rest of the year, and you're committed to doing it, and keeping readers up to date on what's out there, and these are things that writers just don't have the time to do, and we just greatly appreciate the invitation to have a chance to talk to your readers.
Yeah, I think it's
listeners.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's important work for me. I do it, as I said off air, bookstores are closing, and venues for us to get together and talk about books, it's very virtual these days, and I create the slideshows that people can have that moment to see, an author's body of work. And it's very important for me personally to keep the word out for lesbian fiction authors, to help them find an audience, and to keep the fires burning, because each and every one of you spends a phenomenal amount of time not just crafting the things that you write, but promoting the work through readings and going to conferences and getting engaged with social media. So I like being a part of the team, so to speak.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for including me in it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right. So long.
Take care.